Hi, I was sitting playing some war games, and then I was talking to some people around the island here in Bahrain, and I'm sure it's same elsewhere. We're all socially distant, and people are saying, "Well, what is this wargaming thing you do?" I mean, they know, play a bit of guitar, they know that. Play a bit of golf, everyone knows that. So I thought I'd just do a really quick video on the wargaming hobby, right? For the socially distanced and the newbie. So this is not really for grognards. If you're new to the hobby, grognards is like someone like myself who likes playing old games. I think it comes from long ago, referring to French guards in the Napoleonic Wars. So I'll just go down. So what is this wargaming? I mean, I'm sure people have heard of things like Risk. So it's not really Risk. It's like Risk on steroids. And we probably don't use the word game so much as we tend to play a military or a conflict simulation or a historical simulation of some historical. So it's got to feel like a model that presents you with the decisions of the people at that time rather than a game. If you like games, then well, there's games, but personally, I'm not all that into it. Yes, well, it's not about playing with miniatures as well, the sort of things we do, but miniatures are fun. It's not about toy soldiers. Having said that, almost every wargamer I've met had toy soldiers when he was a kid. As far as money goes, it's like really cheap. Most of the games you can pick up for around $80, brand new, half or quarter that second hand on some places I'll show you on Board Game Geek and those sort of things. A lot of them you can even play, just download the rules and play them for almost nothing, although we as a hobby don't tend to do that because we support the hobby by making sure we have a copy of the game. If you're a gamer and you haven't been into war games, you probably think it's all very military, and but it's not. A lot of historical games, the Reformation, political intrigue, all these sort of things. But it's a lot of fun, pushing counters around and devising strategies. But of course, the funny part probably is that you spend a lot of time reading rules, and so some poor fellow here reading Advanced Squad Leader rules, which is about 80 pages of rules. In ASL, I think there's a rule for a machine gun getting blocked in a ditch, whether it's raining or not. So, I mean, that's how detailed it is. And you'll meet lots of people. I mean, there's lots of jokes out there about wargamers. It is pretty sedentary, and there's some big boys out there. But Consim World Expo that happens in Tempe, in Phoenix, Arizona. So I've met like Mark Greenman there, and David Knoll from Seattle. Mark's from Salt Lake City. Myself, I think we're playing Empire of the Sun by look at that there. Avi Solomon, a famous wargamer out of Canberra, runs the wargame convention there. Of course, Bruce Steppens, who introduced me to wargames. I remember walking in back in the 70s, the wargame shop in Brisbane in George Street, and asking the then owner, Tony White, who sadly passed away as well, does anyone else play these games? I got the number of this guy, and well, it's a sad tale from there. Here's my particular wargaming buddies in Brisbane. So Andrew and Hans, and of course, not in shot there are Geordie and Howard as well. And then you meet lots of designers. So Mark Herman is one of our favourite designers for Empire of the Sun, Pacific War, For the People, which is a American Civil War game, We the People, so War Revolution, so great designer. But you're socially distancing at the moment, so many people, but there's lots of resources. There's one called grognards.com, which has a file set out for all the different games you could ever want. So for instance, Empire of the Sun I just mentioned, if you go through that, you'll get all the links to various articles, and there's even like a grognard challenge you can do each month. A lot of fun. Board Game Geek's another online resource that you really should try out. I mean, I think I'm chief chemist there, because I used to be a chemist back in the day. And it's mainly for board games, but there is a war game subdomain there. But what we mainly use it for is to hold our collections of games, and then for each of these games, you click on it, there's a whole lot of data. You can record if you want to sell it, buy it, play it, how many plays you've had, what's your rating. Any comments you make are recorded, and everybody can see those. But of course, the number one place that we all play is Consim World Expo. And so Consim World site, I'm going to go into that in a minute, but I'll just quickly go through this video before I change to my web browser, and I'll just show you a little bit around Consim World, because a lot of newbies find it difficult. The forum's old-fashioned, like bulletin board posting, but it works really well. And you always get people answer your questions there if you've got any rules questions. The news is always there, so again, great place. When we're socially distanced, you think, well, how do you play these board games if you can't actually sit with anyone? Well, there's some online systems. So there's this Java applet Vassal. Was essentially just the board game on a computer. You can play in real time on a server with someone, say over Zoom or Skype or something like that. Or you can play turn-based games where you send the files. Nowadays you set up a Dropbox or something like that rather than emailing them. There's a cyberboard system, which is a bit older but has a lot more games on it, also very good. And then Axe, the automated card tracking system. A lot of these games are driven by a card system, which allows us to model supply, command, these sort of things, impulses. And there's many games there that and a big community of people that play those games, and you're always welcome to join one of the beginners games, and people will teach you as well. Usually if you play an Axe, you'll combine it with Vassal or Cyberboard as well. So what are these games? So when we talk about war games, we're really talking about conflict simulation. So there's computer games like World of Tanks, these sort of things. Well, we're not talking about that. I mean, I played them, but I mean, who cares if you win, right? I mean, you can't go out to dinner with your friends and say, well, I beat the computer. No, people will just fall asleep, right? So I mean, yeah, it's a pastime, right? However, computer strategy games like the Matrix games, like Hearts of Iron, Pacific War, or War in the Pacific, I should say, big East Front games, even the Napoleonic games from back in the 90s and early 2000s. You can play against a computer in practice and then play against someone else, so that's bragging rights. Miniatures. Well, who doesn't love miniatures, right? But they're really expensive to collect miniatures, and there's about 6 or 7 hobbies in there, right? Because there's about collecting your armies, painting your armies, making the terrain. Often when I've played, I mean, we spend more time setting up than actually playing, but nevertheless, never knock a miniature player. I mean, it's very popular in Britain. Board war games, more popular in the USA and Australia, Japan. So the sort of games I'm talking about here are these conflict simulations. There's Euro crossovers like Twilight Struggle, and people love that, and it's one of the biggest sellers, and it's keeping some board conflict simulation companies afloat, actually, selling these, but not really my cup of tea, and it's a bit of a joke there. And some of you will get although maybe not, because you're new, right? So Case Blue is like the biggest conflict simulation game you can buy, and Twilight Struggle is a very playable Euro crossover. So terminology, what are we going to call these things? I mean, they get called war games, conflict simulations, tabletop historical simulations. I prefer to use that one nowadays with all these political correctness around. You've got to be careful what you say. But I mentioned the word war. I mean, I've had people almost fall off their chair at restaurants if they ask me what my hobby is, right? So they'll think I'm an evil person. Board war games, well, board can mean two things in English, right? So what do they all have in common? Well, they all have a map. This one's from Here I Stand, which is Wars of the Reformation, a 2 to 6 player game. They all have pieces, and the pieces have numbers on them. So this particular battle cruiser here, Tiger, has an attack factor, it has a defense factor, it has range and movement. It has rules. Sometimes the rules are 3 or 4 pages, and sometimes they're like War in the Pacific or A World at War. They're like 30, 40, 60, 70 pages, but you really don't need to read all those. A lot of those are look-up rules, so never get too scared about that. There's usually smaller scenarios you can play. They all have some tables. So how does the combat work? Well, you roll dice and look on a table. So if you get 3 to 1 odds, you roll your dice here, which could get modified, and it's either defender eliminated or something happens to the attacker or the defender. So I tend to use tabletop historical simulations for my games. So let's talk about scale. There's all different types of scale. So depending on what you like to play, there's tactical, so where you're talking about like squads, sections, so squad leader is a classic there, or advanced squad leader, right up to say battalions. And in those games, you're thinking about range, initiative, cover, and who are you? You're playing the part of, say, of a captain or a lieutenant, all right? So they're the sort of decisions you'd be making. Whereas if you play a battle, like the Battle of Leipzig, the Battle of Waterloo, Battle of the Bulge, this example here, so there you're looking at, say, battalion up to corps level, and there it's about maneuver, force and balance, and breakthrough. So you're trying to win that battle. And there you're playing the part of an army general. If you go to more operational, say on a whole area, say Drive on Stalingrad, so Case Blue, 1942 in Russia, then you're looking at scales a bit bigger, so you're looking at corps again, but you're starting to look more at organisations, supply and support assets like aircraft and these sort of things, bridging equipment. So there you're playing a Supreme Army Commander or the General Staff, so maybe you're Napoleon, maybe you're Eisenhower, maybe you're Zhukov. And then strategic games, which I tend to play a lot of, where we're talking about divisions, corps, armies. So in this level, we're talking about political production, technology, force projection, research even. And so here you're playing the political power, so in this case Churchill. Time periods, everything from ancient, medieval, pre-Napoleonic, like musket and pike, 30 Years' War, these sort of things. 7 Years' War, Napoleonic, post-Napoleonic would be sort of Victorian Age, American Civil War, World War I, between the wars, such as the Russian Civil War, World War II, and contemporary. And within those, of course, there's various fronts. So World War II could be West Front, East Front, Mediterranean, Pacific, or global. And there's various games and game systems that can be used for that. And maybe you're into a particular interest group, so there's particular games that just ground, just air, just sea, or combined. So lots of things you can do. My particular collection is mostly battle and operational around Napoleonic, from the 1700s, 1800s. And World War II, I have a lot of global and multi-front and a lot of operational sort of games. So with that, I'm going to quickly just go to Concern World. Let's see. We will go next, first page, and go back. Right, so Consim World, here we are. And I'll just quickly show you a beginner's guide to get moving around on that. So as you can see here, there's a front page with all the news, and there's even a Discord channel, and there's a Wednesday night meetup, various news on new games. Down the bottom here we have publishers, all the different games, blogs, YouTube channels, podcast channels, gaming online, these things I told you about how to play, hobby history. If you go to the forums and you're playing a particular game and you need some help or want to discuss something, so let's say Empire of the Sun, strategic World War II Pacific game, would go here. Okay, so I want World War II, individual game, Pacific, go find my game, Empire of the Sun, here it is, and I can see here that there's a whole bunch of stuff that I might, with any errata or any changes to the game, and you can see postings here of various people about questions in the game, and Mark Herman, he's the designer. So with not rabbiting on too much, I think just go to Board Game Geek here finally and just have a look at my collection. So you can see here, once you start playing, you can start collecting. You'll have different interests, I'm sure, but that's pretty much a wrap up. So that's everything you wanted to know about board gaming and wargaming, and hopefully that'll get you started. So that's it. See you later. Bye.